Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan Hollander, and I'm here in New York City, and I'm talking to you from the Battery Dance Company. Now, to start this talk about my journey in dance, I really think I have to talk about the here and now. With the pandemic, as you know, New York City was one of the epicenters in the world for the COVID-19. And on March 13th, everything shut down for Battery Dance and for the entire city of New York with social distancing. Dance studios were closed, theaters were closed. We all dispersed to our homes, and we've been there ever since. In addition, as you know from the news, Black Lives Matter and the marches and the protests have been taking place in New York over the last couple of weeks since the tragic death, the murder of George Floyd. I need to bring these topics up at the very beginning because this is the here and now, and this affects all of us. And I know that the waves of support around the world in terms of justice for people of every color and the need for all of us to stay safe at the same time, these are issues that are around us and affecting us, and we must pay attention. To go to the beginning of my career in dance, which is on July 1st, Battery Dance, the dance company I founded in 1976, turns 45 years old, and we enter our 45th year. It's been a long journey, but in some ways it seems like it's gone in a flash. Um, and I've been asked to talk about how I chose dance, and even from that very first question, that the feeling that I have is that dance chose me. I had studied classical piano and theater, visual arts, and academics, of course, literature. All of the art field were part of my makeup as a young person as I was growing up. And I remember having the feeling that I didn't know how I would ever choose among these fields that I loved. But when dance found me, so to speak, I realized that it was my path, it was my journey, and that all of the other things that I loved about world cultures, about people working together, about the arts and seeking some form of beauty and evocation and enlightenment, all of these things could be channeled into one thing, dance. And for me, that 45 years has been a climb, I have to say, with many, many challenges. I mean, you all know that dance is a field that no one chooses in order to be financially secure. That's probably the last thing anybody thinks about when they become a dancer. And unfortunately, that's a given that has been a line throughout my life and my career, but I've learned how to cope with it. But at the same time, I came from a family where my parents supported me. They supported my choices. They gave me access to a wonderful life. They allowed me at age 16 to go to India and to live with a family in Mumbai, which was a life-changing experience. And in many ways set things in motion for me in terms of the international programs that I've been involved with over the years with Battery Dance. Um, they gave me the access to the arts in terms of piano lessons and opportunities to do things outside of the school day that enriched me and gave me exposure. So by saying this, I'm revealing the fact that I came from a very supportive family and a family that could afford to give me these luxuries, so to speak. And I know that many people cannot have this. And so I think that we have to pay attention to that. We have to pay attention to the fact that people have not had equal opportunities, and that it's my great hope that the social movements that are happening now in my country and around the world will bring lasting change and justice and equality. This is something that I think dancers understand, because when we're dancing in a studio together, when we're dancing on stage together, there's a democratizing aspect of what we do. We cannot do it by ourselves. We do it with others. And that's one of the things that I think was the driving force, one of the driving forces for me to realize that dance was my medium. Piano was too solitary, and theater involved speaking in lines that I had trouble memorizing. And also the practice of these other art forms was not something that inspired me every single hour, every single day. Whereas when I started studying dance at the late age of 18, something changed for me at that point. Being at the ballet bar, doing the exercises, of course, there's a lot of repetition. You can't progress unless you repeat over and over and over again. But there was something about that repetition that was beautiful for me. It was appealing for me. It was something that I savored. And I will say that because of my love of music, which kept me studying piano for 13 years until I found dance and found my music being in the body, in the dance, that having music as the motivation and underpinning for dance is something that I have always loved. And I think it's part of a reason why a culture like India has embraced my work, even if the vocabulary of Western contemporary dance was not something that Indian audiences were accustomed to. The fact that the movement and the music fused into one thing is something that Indian audiences could understand because of the incredible history of Indian dance and music and fusing into one art form, inseparable. I don't know an Indian classical dancer who isn't in some form a musician. Um, the, the, the rhythms that Kathak dancers have to understand, the complexity of the rhythm of music. And in terms of Bharatanatyam, similarly, the way that the musicians and the dancer interact, these art forms are inextricable. So I bring up India because having lived in India as a 16-year-old and being exposed to Indian dance, music, theater, and the culture itself, and then coming back to the United States, I felt like a whole new layer was given to me in terms of my development and my desire to find a way of having a career that would bring me into the world, the larger world. In 1976, having been a struggling dancer in New York City for 4 years, I decided that I needed to find a way to express myself choreographically. I was beginning to understand my limitations as a dancer. Starting so late, uh, there were certain challenges that I could never overcome. I would go to the big concert halls, Lincoln Center in New York, and I would see some of the greatest dancers at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. And I was right there at the Merce Cunningham studio, studying there, seeing dancers who could do things I would never be able to do. And I think that issue of facing challenges and facing limitations and coming to terms with your own limitation, I think that that's something that dance gave me and something I had to get through, which of course was difficult and initially very hard for me. But at the same time, I think that propelled me in terms of this journey from dancer to choreographer to artistic director to entrepreneur, one could say. I want to talk a little bit about arts education and social relevance, which is a pillar of my work, a pillar of the work of Battery Dance. We always say that our mantra is artistic excellence and social relevance. And by putting those two aspirations next to each other, the intention is that we say you can be an artist, you can spend all of the time developing your craft as a dancer, as a choreographer, and putting works of art on stage for an audience. But at the same time, what can a dance company do in the world in terms of interacting with the social elements of what's going on around us? We have a studio in a very old building. It's more than 175 years old. And you climb up 97 steps to get to the studio. So by the time you get upstairs, you're already warmed up, which is one benefit we have to think about while we're climbing those stairs. But at the same time, we're not separate from the world around us. the marches and protests of the past several weeks, the pandemic and people needing to wear masks, the empty streets, all of these things form part of who we are. And if we ignore them, then somehow we're lesser artists for it. Um, Battery Dance, being located in Lower Manhattan, the current pandemic is not the first tragedy that we have suffered. We were very, very close proximity to the World Trade Towers on 9/11, 2001. And that experience, of course, was shattering in every way. And I don't think we'll ever get over that experience. At the same time, we were able to move on and we were not prohibited from working together, whereas this pandemic has separated us. So dealing with that separation in a field that thrives on touch and contact, lifting dancers, using each other's weight, this idea of social separation, and that's critical at this point, is something that new that we have to work through. And I would say that the element of improvisation that musicians know so well, we dancers have to understand improvisation. We cannot plan every element of our lives. If we think we can, we're sadly mistaken. I mean, my life and my journey was not planned. Dropping out of college, coming to New York, trying to deal with the competition here, trying to deal with my own limitations. Each element of challenge encouraged some new growth. And I think the issue that we can think about now is how do we respond to the closing of theaters, the closing of studios, the need to be separate from each other, whereas our entire enterprise is an ensemble experience. So what Battery Dance did after March 13th, when everything closed down, within a few days, my team worked remotely and created something called Battery Dance TV. And since March 27th, when that went online, Battery Dance TV, we've put up almost 400 programs, ranging from fitness and training to ballet movement, to classes in jazz, to original dances that people are doing in their living rooms, their hallways, their kitchens. Improvisation, in other words. Coping with a situation that was unprecedented and that we never could have planned for, dealing with whatever equipment we may have, and in fact, I have to excuse the fact that I'm 2 hours late for this Facebook Live, dealing with technological issues. So once again, the spirit of never give up, the spirit of I can do, the spirit of sort of self-examination and going to the core and trying to understand what's really, really important and what's really urgent. That's the time we're in right now. So what's really urgent for me is for all of us at Battery Dance, and I'm sure my colleagues in dance around the world, is how do we maintain ourselves? How do we maintain our connection to the world at large? So speaking about that, no one anticipated that our art form would go remote, that our art form would have to go virtual, that the live experience would be halted for who knows how long. And that bred invention, that bred an engagement that probably would have taken a year to figure out had we had the idea that it's something we should do, but it never would have been a priority because we as dancers love the live experience. We love the interaction with audiences. We thrive on being with people and being with each other. But we can't be. So what happens? We have to be with each other this way on Facebook Live and on Zoom calls and on interactions that technology permits. Just think if we were living at a different time when these kind of means were not available to us. I'm sure we would have thought of something else. At this point, I have no idea what that could be. But we're taking full advantage of the technology. And I know that many of us would have thought, I don't want to teach online. It's not the same thing. I want to be able to touch my student and show him or her where the legs should be, where the arms should be, whatever. In a sense, Battery Dance had a preview of this experience because in 2014 we began training two dancers in Baghdad and Erbil, Iraq. And they had reached out to us. They didn't have a way of studying dance in their own places. There were prohibitions against dancing, especially that these two dancers were men, and men dancing was a serious problem in Iraq. And I know that there are barriers for men in the field of dance that one has to overcome. So we had used Skype at the time to train these two dancers, and so we knew that this was possible. We also knew that there were limitations. So at this point, what do? You say there are limitations, I'm not going to do it? No, of course not. You say I'm going to do it, and I'm going to figure out how to get better and do it better. I'll give you another example of sort of listening to the world and responding. We all know that some of the heroes of today are the healthcare workers and the frontline service workers who have kept going out in order to serve the rest of us who are staying in. And so we thought, what can we do for these people who have been doing so much for us and for society during this crisis? And we created something called mindful movement for healthcare workers. And 8 times a week, our dancers are giving 15-minute peaceful, tranquil opportunities for healthcare workers to stop thinking about everybody else and think about themselves and how they can heal themselves. We all need this. I have actually been taking some of these sessions because I find that I'm online, I'm on the computer, I'm at a screen all day long, Zooming and Skyping and Facebook, whatever the platform might be, and that I'm not actually taking care of myself. And so this is a way that artists here have responded to that need. We also know that many families are at home, their children are not in school, so parents are trying to work remotely with their jobs, and meanwhile the kids are supposed to be online taking classes. And what's happening with the family unit during that time? So we've also put online classes for children. Again, there's nothing magic about what we're doing. We're just listening to the world and we're responding in whatever way we can. And I think that's one of the beauties and one of the luxuries of being in the arts, is that there's a constant flow of give and take. Let's say you're performing on stage and on the one hand, you're totally involved in what you're doing, and your technique, your rhythm, your timing, your expression, everything. But at the same time, you're feeling that energy from the audience. And so there's this communication that goes back and forth that's just so rich and so exciting. And now we're faced with the issue of how do we get that kind of involvement with our audience when we're talking to air, we're talking to a screen, we don't feel the energy of the audience. So I see that many people have been sending notes on Facebook, and I really appreciate in the chat your feedback. It's great to see it. It reinforces the fact that I'm not by myself here in this screen world. I'm with you, and I really appreciate it. And again, I do want to mention once again Dwani and this creation that she has come up with to bring artist talks to the community, wherever that community might be, in India, in the United States, in any country around the world. Think about that. Think about the silver lining of the fact that young people can take classes in whatever dance genre they want to, just by getting on their phones. This never existed before, this kind of wealth of opportunity online. You can see any kind of dance performance, and I find myself looking at forms of dance and dancers and dance companies that I never even heard of before. But everybody's putting so much online. On the one hand, there's an overload of traffic. On the other hand, there's a wealth of experiences that are out there if you want to take advantage of it. Something about arts education that has been part of Battery Dance Company's platform for service to the community from almost the very beginning of our work. New York City public schools have over 1 million students, and many schools do not have dance as part of the curriculum. I think most don't. And so over the years, we have tried to do whatever we can to support the lives and the experience and the access to the arts for young people in New York City public schools. And this has been so enriching because wherever we go, we find talent, we find spark, we find resonance and feedback. That same kind of communication I was speaking about before. When you're working with young people, you're working with people with so much creativity and opportunity once you open the door and give them that chance. So in 2006, we created a program called Dancing to Connect. This was again forced by challenges. The challenge in this case was working with people without dance training and at the same time doing something meaningful in 20 hours, very limited time. This is a program that was designed primarily for our international tours because we wanted to be able to be involved in the community and be involved in an interactive way, not just be on stage, show our work, and helicopter out. We wanted to integrate with communities, and Dancing to Connect proved to be a really wonderful way of doing it. Again, improvisation. We were told you have 20 hours, you have 5 days. What can you do that will be meaningful, that will have impact, long lasting? So we created a methodology that involves working with groups of 20 students over the course of 20 hours. Groups of 20 students. So each one of my dancers was in charge of a different group. And at the end of the process, at the end of those 5 days, 5 separate pieces of choreography had been created. And the students would come up to me because I was not running them, my dancers were doing that. Students would say, "Mr. Hollander, how do you like our dance?" And it was that sense of ownership, that sense that they had actually done something. We're not imitating something that the grown-ups had given them. This was an unlocking of creativity and a sharing of the tools of choreography with young people that they can then have some new resource that they didn't know they could possibly have. In fact, I didn't know that either. When we started this program, I had a kind of old school idea that in order to be a choreographer, you had to be a trained dancer. And I found out when I saw these young people and what they were able to achieve and express themselves without training, without polish, without the sort of finesse of a classical or contemporary dance form, I found something very powerful and very meaningful and very full of emotion. Young people telling their stories through the body, telling their stories through dance. It's a beautiful experience. So we tried it out in New York City public schools, in Germany and Cambodia in 2006. What happened? In the intervening years, it has been in over 50 countries, and in some countries like Germany, it's been in 26 cities. So somehow, something that we tested out and tried without any expectation that it would be sort of the new, big, great thing. It was just something to try, became something that was an engine for Battery Dance Company, carrying us forward and enabling us to interact with people all over the world. There is a film that I'd like to point you to. It's called Moving Stories. And it's you can see it on www.movingstoriesfilm.com. This tells the journey of Battery Dance in India, in Romania, in South Korea, and Iraq. And basically tells the stories of young people engaging with us in this Dancing to Connect process and what happens to them, the transformative experience of the arts. So a wonderful opportunity for us to have our story told around the world through film. Again, no plan, sitting down at a dinner next to some filmmakers who then talked to my colleague and said, well, who's capturing your work? Who's going with you and making films? And we said, well, we're using our cameras. And they said, no, 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 that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about making a documentary film. This brings me to the last point that I want to make, is that we're not in this enterprise alone. That dance is not a solitary profession. It's not something that you can do on your own. You're forced to understand how to work with other people, and other people being people coming from different worlds, different realms, different backgrounds, finding harmony in the dance company itself. This has been a very strengthening, and it, it has been an element of battery dance that has made my life enriched and constantly exciting to go into the studio and see the work that my dancers are doing. And at this point, as I said, they've all become choreographers. So the trajectory of mine has been very natural and organic because I never feel like I'm sad to leave behind where I have been. I'm ready to go forward. And I hope you all are too. It's a very, very hard time that we're going through right now. And I know that people are suffering financially. I know that people are questioning their choices of career. I know that some people are taking up a second career temporarily or maybe permanently in order to support themselves through this crisis. But I want to say that we all have to have hope, and we have to be optimistic, and we have to believe we will come out of this stronger and better than we were before. I want to thank Dwani, and I want to thank all of you for giving your time. Apologies for being 2 hours late. I'm a very timely person. I'm not early usually, but I'm usually on time. In this case, thank you for giving me the luxury of the extra 2 hours. And signing off, Jonathan Hollander, Battery Dance, New York City, and all the best, and stay safe. Thank you.